Does investing make you a worse operator?
I think it does when
almost everything in running a company has changed over the last 7 years. If you sold your company 10 years ago, you don't know anything about how customer success works, how new types of sales work. Having somebody who's a little bit more current, that co-founder that you can't hire, can be really appealing.
There's many things those of us who've been around for a long time don't like about VCs. Sweating the wrong things. Founder-led funds today are gonna sweat some of the things as much as a traditional investor would be, whose job is on the line. And I think that's appealing for founders. A lot of founders give much tougher love, or whatever you want to call it, than I've seen investors do. When I look back at the people who really did me justice in the long term, they told me stuff that sucked to hear on a particular day, but was good over the long term.
So Jason, what is our bet for today?
The bet is...
I am so excited for this. I've wanted to do this one for quite a while. So we're going to start off with some intros, quick 30 seconds each. Let's do Jack, Auren, and Jason. Jack, starting with you. Who are you? Tell me the two hats.
I'm Jack. My founder hat is that I started Lattice in 2015, which is an HR software company. We build a bunch of different products, performance management, employee engagement, compensation, et cetera. We also now have an HRIS. And so we've kind of built this multi-product company over the years. And that's what I spend the majority of my time on. And then over the last 4 years, I've also become an active early stage investor. So that's the other one.
Auren, over to you.
Sure, Auren Hoffman, CEO of Safegraph. We're a very boring data company. We sell data on physical places. And then my other hat on the side is help run Flex Capital. We're a Series A, Series B venture capital firm.
Mr. Lemkin?
I'm Jason Lemkin. I run a community and a blog called SaaStr. And I've been investing for just over 10 years now from a variety of vehicles.
Okay, so we're going to dive straight in. Just try and understand, like any product, which capital is in some ways, we need to have a reason to exist. Why do founders want other founders as their lead? Let's start with that, and I'm just going to throw it out into the open, and anyone can grab it.
Maybe not necessarily lead, but I think at least one of the reasons that founders like to have other founders as investors in general is that it's a good source of tactical advice and general support from somebody who's done the thing that they're doing. And it's relevant. Like, it's not like 10 years out of date, which often becomes the case for VCs. My view is actually that I think there's a lot of value to having both active founders and full-time investors, because I think they just provide sort of different perspectives, types of support, vantage points. So I don't encourage founders ever to not have like full-time investors involved, but I think both are good. But I think the reasons people want founders are due to just the active hands-on advice that you get from someone who's done what you're doing and is still currently doing it.
Yeah, almost everything in running a company has changed over the last 7 years. So if you sold your company 10 years ago, you don't know anything about how customer success works, how new types of sales works, how product-led growth works, how even like all the recruiting stack works. You're really just out of date. Maybe on the very, very big things, you're still current because those things are timeless and they don't change. But all the medium and small things have changed dramatically. You didn't even like use Slack 10 years ago. So it just, everything has changed so much. And just now having somebody who's a little bit more current as kind of that co-founder that you can't hire can be really appealing.
We also have work from home and entitled millennials, don't we, Jason?
For what it's worth, just one thought I thought about this question: why do founders want founder-led funds? And I've co-invested with Auren and Jack and worked with both and recommended them both. But I thought a little bit about it, and I think it's actually about brand. And I thought about my whole life as an entrepreneur. When I started in the old days, there were only two brands in venture I knew of. There was Sequoia and Kleiner, right? And you had to take a discount for both of them, right? You'd go out and you'd get your term sheet from somebody else, and then Kleiner would insist on a 20% discount. And that's the way the world worked. There are a couple of brands, and there's more brands now, and Andreessen and YC changed the notion of brand. But I actually think as founders have gotten more sophisticated and the markets have gotten bigger, these are brands. These are brands, and founders, like for especially first-time founders, but also second-time founders, we don't have time, and brands are a proxy for quality, right? So it's like, I don't know that much about Altman Capital. Like, I know a little bit from the website, but I know Jack from all the things he does, and so it's a brand, I think. And I think that's actually why founders are attracted to it. I think the operational experience is only part of it.
Okay, so I'm deliberately going to push back despite being in favor of everything you say. Yeah, I agree with
I don't
you
think
guys.
I don't think it's a negative. I just think it's more, I think this is why for LPs, and this is maybe going to some of the stuff Auren's written, that's why I think it's a good bet for LPs, because it's not just the operational experiences, that it's an orthogonal brand.
I get you, but we've had founders, investors, angels for years. Why do we need funds? Why do they need to leverage institutional funds? And why do they need to be a bigger part of rounds?
They maybe they don't, but these guys are pretty good investors. Listen, I think Auren's written a lot about it, and Jack can challenge it, but it may be as simple as, Auren, you've been in angel investing for what, since your teens? You've been on cap tables I've invested on since I started. How long have you been doing some pretty good investing? 15 years?
Yeah, they're about. Yeah.
One thing that changed the last 4 or 5 years is LPs wanted to put more and more money into angels and micro funds that performed. When I raised my fund in 2016, people thought it was crazy. Like, oh my God, this guy raised a $70 million fund. It's nuts. Like, a guy like this should only be able to raise 15 to 20. Just fast forward like a couple years to Flex, right? And like the world changed. It went from crazy to commonplace in like a couple of years.
But Harry, to your point, I think it's a good question, and I don't think it's necessary. I think it just works. I do think that when people invest more, they naturally end up being closer to the companies. So I think if somebody does half of your seed round versus if they are a small angel, you will generally get more time, but it's not proportionate. And to your point, like when I think of a lot of my small angel checks that wrote, a $50K check into Lattice, the pound for pound help to dollars there was crazy because the people still help a lot. Would they have helped a little bit more if they did 500 instead of 50? Maybe, but not 10 times more. So I think I accept the premise of the question as I don't think it's necessary.
I think a really interesting question that I often ask myself is, I work with a lot of angels who are founders, and they're brutal to the founders. We live in this like founder-friendly VC world. The founders come in and say, Jason, that's shit. Why did you do that? You're a moron. Like, that was stupid. And so my question to you, and, bluntly, they do it out of tough love and they're very helpful. I don't mean that cruelly. But it's not that empathetic. Are founder-led investors and funds as founder-friendly or empathetic as people think?
Well, most good founders have low EQ. So they generally would not be that.
Is that right? Do you think that's right? Most good founders have low EQ?
I think so. Yeah. I don't think EQ is one of the highest things on the list. And they are going to kind of tell it like it is. And every VC today is founder friendly, right? It's pretty rare nowadays for a founder to get fired, whereas like in the 80s and 90s, that was commonplace for a founder to get fired. But there is a big difference. Most founder CEOs are very undercompensated. Like the go forward comp for a founder CEO today, let's say you're there for over 4 years, your go forward comp is probably 5x lower than if they hired an outside CEO. And that's really just patented unfair. And a traditional VC is never going to go to the founder and be like, hey, you should get a higher, we should give you some more options and stuff like that. So there are some like nice things about having these like dual threat CEOs on your cap table.
Can I be blunt? Should we go back to a time when more founders were fired?
If you look across like a lot of data of companies that have gone the full distance, it seems to me that the very, very best companies tend to be founder-led forever. However, that doesn't mean that that's what should happen with the merely excellent companies. There's a big difference between a $10 billion company and a $300 billion company. I think there are another set of companies that are not the earth-shattering product market fit companies where there does become a stage later in the company's life where professional CEOs can be really effective and it does become a different game than what was started early. But I feel that in the early days of a company, the replacement move is more likely to fail than succeed 9 times out of 10 before the company's got a certain amount of like stability to it.
The founder is really important in that 0 to 1 moment. And to become a $100 billion company, there's often like 10 0 to 1 moments along the way that are really, really important. It's not just like one from the beginning and then you just ride it. So if you look at all these companies like Facebook, whatever, there's so many reinventions over the years. Even a great CEO, it's really hard for that person to have the moral authority to pivot the whole company or to transform the whole company, say this is the mobile moment, et cetera. They're just not going to have that ability to do it. They can steward a company. They can do an incredible job of going that one to end, but they have a lot of trouble going that 0 to 1 side.
You know, Harry, I just reran the numbers on SaaStr. It's 88%. 88% of SaaS companies that have IPO'd have the founder as CEO at IPO.
Wow.
Now it's declining. The folks like the Brian Halligans, like after 20 years, folks do get tired. That's a different issue. We'll see. Mark Benioff won't run Salesforce forever, right? But it's 88%. And my guess is VCs have also gotten lazier and we've raised more money, right? And my guess is when you see the 88% from pattern matching, you're like, at the margin. In the old days, when I started, when I raised money for my first startup, I was put under the gun by my VCs to bring in a CEO to replace me. It was part of the term sheet and the goal. And all of the ideas were worse than me, but that was part of the deal as a first-time founder. I think people are lazy. And I also think the other thing is for founder-led funds, I don't think any of us have a room full of these guys. Like I wrote this term, you have to have a room of guys. And there's no gender in this term. If you're going to get rid of a founder CEO, even if you have the actual ability to do it, which is rare today, you better have someone to step in. Right. And I just don't know any founder led fund that has, I call them the guys down the hall because I remember bigger funds used to you'd walk down some big fund. Hey, Jack, let me introduce you to Bob and Ellen in Lorraine. He was president of. And they can kind of step in. They can kind of step in at the big funds, right?
If you think of Benchmark in the 90s, like they had this whole room full of these folks and they would just bring them in once they invested in the company, and those folks would take over as CEO.
Yeah. And I don't think any of the 4 people on this have any of those people.
Could I go back to the question that led to this, which was about the the founder friendliness, which
Sure.
I think is like an important insight, because I think you're right, Harry, that I've seen this. A lot of founders give much tougher love or whatever you want to call it than I've seen investors do. And I guess I would reframe it, hopefully, as like kind, not nice, where I think a lot of founders, like I had this experience where I'm like, when I look back at the people who really did me like justice in the long term, they told me stuff that sucked to hear on a particular day, but was good over the long term. It's like when you're like trying to find product market fit, a customer who's like nodding and saying like, oh yeah, that looks really interesting. Like keep building, we'll check it out, because they don't want to tell you it's not interesting. Like that person's doing you a great disservice. My hope would be that the reason founders are tougher in their feedback is not because they're callous or low EQ. Hopefully we could debate that, Auren, but I think it would hopefully be a result of them wanting to help the founder succeed and believing that saying the hard thing is part of how you do that.
It's being long-term nice versus short-term nice. Like I don't let my kids eat ice cream for breakfast. That would be short-term nice, but it wouldn't be long-term nice.
I totally get you. Good example. I think the big question is like performance and like what makes one better and what makes one produce the best results. If we start like, how does operating make one a better investor, do we think?
I haven't seen the data in a while. Auren's pretty good with data. I remember a few years ago, I forget whose analysis was, there was no advantage. Like to being an operators were no better than professional. That may not include pre-seed, right, or other things. But it wasn't, when I wrote this up a few years ago, that whatever data source I looked, I think founders preferred it. It didn't necessarily benefit the LPs, apples to oranges. Like the CEO that worked at Benchmark, maybe Benchmark's the wrong example, that worked at wherever didn't perform better than the person that had the Harvard MBA, right? But the world's different, and founders have more choice today, right? They can make their own choices, right or wrong.
Guys, how do you think operating makes you see companies invest in a better way? And when I say operating, I don't mean like just operating at the same time.
Well, if you're operating, like often you're investing in companies that like are your vendors that you're using. You've used the product, like you've played with the product.
That's
and you're
a cheat code, right?
Yeah, you're like, this product's amazing. Like you just see it, you've used it. You're like, this is incredible. Yeah, and then you like call up the CEO. You don't even know who the person is. You're like, hey, I'm your client. I'm using your product. And they're like, oh, they start talking. You start geeking out about the product, and then kind of one thing leads to another, and you end up investing. So that's like a great solution. Like you fall in love with the product first before like the company ever gets a chance to pitch you.
Yeah, I +1 that. I think, and actually, I was going to say the same thing. I think there are like puts and takes for both operators and full-time VCs, and I don't know what shakes out to be more of an advantage. I guess Jason has data that neither outweighs the other. But on the operator side, that's a big one, like your own vendors. I think another big one is that you end up spending a lot of time with people who are building and execs and ICs who use tools, and you hear about their problems. And so you are steeped in customers just by the nature of your work all the time. Like, for example, right now I have a good sense for what the execs of each function at most software companies, I have a good general sense for what are their top few software solutions that they care about, just because I'm like living in it. And so that does build a slightly more prepared mind for if you see a finance tool that does this thing that you know is not on the radar, you have some better sort of intuition maybe for, is this going to matter? Could it matter? Could it grow into some adjacency that matters? So I think just being steeped in the realities of markets, at least, I'm speaking about like B2B SaaS. I think this is useless for like consumer or hardware or other things. But I think it helps on those.
I wonder if it helps you going to that point, Jack. When I think back, I was 5 for 5 in my first venture investments, right? Not perfect, but 5 for 5. And I really did just invest in the problems I had as a founder. But it's not that simple, because I see founders making the dumbest angel investments of all time. Okay. They're like, oh, this would be cool if I did this video meets Riverside audio, and it's moronic. But what I realized I could see was where spaces were changing because I was so deep in them. So I could see where the call center was changing because I had so many headaches. I could see where search for TalkDesk and search for Algolia, and even things that seem simple like CRM for Pipedrive, or with Greenhouse that Jack knows where I was pre-revenue, and then Salesloft, which I remember everyone laughed at when I was involved with Salesloft pre-revenue. But I could see how my sales team was changing, even though these all seemed like tired categories. Like all of these were actually tired categories that no one at the fund I worked with supported, because for logical reasons, they've all been done before. And I don't get it. So that's something an operator will get, is see how these things are in motion, right? That I think for early stage can be if you're good, it can be very advantageous.
I think the most helpful heuristic though, Jason, is one that you say quite often, which is like, I measure every CEO against myself. Like, are they better than I was? And if they're better than I was, and I did 100 million at it like you did, then they're going to pass a bar of quality. Do you see what I mean? It gives you that benchmark, which you wouldn't have if you weren't an operator.
That's the superpower that everyone on this on this podcast has, which is everyone knows who's better than them, right? That is one superpower that successful founders have, that money investors, when I say they don't even know what it means.
Yeah.
Auren, who's better than you're? Pretty good. Who's better than you? Who have you interviewed on your DAS that's better than you? Who's better than you?
Keith Raboy.
Okay. Yeah.
Significantly
Who
better
else is
than me.
better?
There are a lot of people who are better than me.
Who's in the HR space? Who's better than you, Jack? Who's better than you as a CEO? Who's better? Founder, better founder. Maybe not better CEO. Who's a better founder?
I don't know who's better, but there's a lot that are really good. I mean, like Parker from Rippling's really good.
Yeah.
The Deal founder, the Gusto founders.
They're good, right?
They're really
so
good.
You can
there's
see that, right?
Really
but say that take a typical all money invest. When I say that, they don't even know what it means.
Well, one of the things is really just the question is like, is investing an individual sport or is it a team sport? And the problem is, I think in the past and really even in the present, it's really been thought of as an individual sport. If you even think of the awards that are given up to the investors are given to a person, not to the firm, which is just crazy. But and there are these great full stack investors, the Mike Moritzes of the world, who are just like this incredible full stack who can literally do everything all through the stack. But most of us are just near.
Why is it crazy to give it to one investor? Alfred Lind, sourced, led, sat on the board of Airbnb.
Because I think these things are complicated in that, like, I'm not the best person in the world at like doing the deep diligence in a company and really diving into the financials and really diving into their churn analysis. And you're going to start to see different firms start splitting the stack a bit. And they're going to have certain people who are going to be good at, just like as in a company, we have engineers and we have salespeople at our company. They're not the same person. We could have somebody who does both, but they wouldn't be nearly as good as the person who just does engineering and the person who just does sales, right? You split the stack and you play to people's strengths. You're going to start to see that much more so with investing, where if you're going to have a team anyway, And if you're going to have a team of 5 people, you might as well have teams where you can play to people's strengths and they can divide it up and you work as a team rather than just 5 random individuals who are sharing a pool of capital.
Okay, so how would you divide that up then? Sorry, Jack, I'm intrigued. You have someone for inbound sourcing, you have someone for diligence, you have someone for closing, someone for...
Exactly, all the above. So, and you're going to have people who are very good. So like a professional investor is going to be very good at like diving into the financials, very good at diving into the due diligence. They're generally probably going to be a lot more skeptical. A current founder, so one of these dual threat CEOs like Jack or I or something like that, we're going to be a little bit more optimistic. So we're going to see the opportunities, but we might miss the threats. Having this team approach can be really, really exciting if you have the right team.
I get you, but you're not actually breaking it down by function there. You're breaking that down more by like mindset. Actually,
I thought about this. I think Auren's right. I'm curious what you think too. I've thought a lot about, because I started off completely full stack, right? I started off working at a third-party VC firm, all on my own, lone guy, no help, right? Doing everything. And I've done that. And now I've seen after 10 years, it's not optimal, right? The deals I've missed, the things I should only be doing what I'm good at. The problem with full stack is it's like doing sales engineering, marketing, and you can do it in the early days, right? But it's hard to get to 100 million in ARR.
Yeah.
On the other hand, the economics of a solo GP are very compelling at many levels, also just from a quality of life perspective, not just money. So there's a trade-off, but I think you need this, this helps, right? And if you've got CEOs running it, you got to build a bench, right?
I feel like the grandpa curmudgeon on this call. I don't do Halloween and you guys all do. And I'm just like throwing arguments at you. But I disagree with you all again because thank you, Jason, for that wonderful mascot. No, I disagree with you all again because we actually do the team sport in a way. Jack, you co-lead rounds with amazing... we all co-lead rounds with amazing professional investors. And they supplement or complement our skills in the way that they would if they were on our team, but they're not on our team. So the question is, do they actually even need to be on our team? We just structure rounds that way.
I don't feel super strongly about this, but I was going to, at least for the interest of the conversation, take the slightly other side of this, which is that, and there's obviously great examples of exactly what you're describing where venture is done as like a team sport. You see these big firms that are highly differentiated and very successful. So like, I don't have the sort of nuances that will sort of say like, if this, then that, and otherwise this. But it does seem to me when I like think about a lot of the like greatest investors, there does seem to be a full stackiness about them in certain cases where they do seem to create their own brand, have their own taste for what they're willing to spend time on, make their own investments and work with those companies through the life cycle. And for every sort of like venture firm that is highly specialized where you have like a ton of people doing a lot of roles, there are also good examples where it's closer to like a collection of lone wolves who are just a loose coupling of a lot of people who are each doing something that is a bit more full stacky, obviously with, qualification and things like that and outreach happening from junior people. And then obviously, you see platform teams, which we could debate how valuable they are, but there's other stuff like that too. But I would just add that there is at least value to the other format too, and lots of good examples where people have been very successful in the full stacky approach.
I totally agree with you. I sat down with one of the best investors of the last 20, 25 years, and I said, how do you feel about the changing nature of venture? He said, what the fuck are you talking about? I said, what? And he said, there's 2 to 3 great entrepreneurs a year. You need to invest in one of them. It's simple but hard. Lunch is on you.
Yeah, but you know what's changed, Harry? It's a good. I don't think that's changed, but that's why I thought a lot about Auren's point. If you're going to be early stage, there's so many startups today. And it's funny, when I started investing 10 years ago, and I remember when Slack and Zoom took off, I was like, I didn't see them. I'm a horrible investor, right? Even though they actually were like SaaStr community fans, right? I felt like an idiot. Today, I never feel that way because there's too many I could never open up a TechCrunch or Strictly VC and feel like an idiot for not hearing something, because if you want to see those 1 or 2, I actually think it helps to see 10 times more startups than it did 5 or 6 years ago. 10 times. You don't have to if your top of the funnel is perfect. Like if you can get everyone in, but it's just such a big world. How do you
Which
do
is
it
a
as one
great
person?
point, because like, yeah, you know, I hear both of those things. Hopefully I've heard more than 2 to 3, but let's say there's 10, you know, or 15 is, I think, you know, maybe, but like there's some small number of companies that are going to matter in any given year that are, if you're not in one of them, it's venture so power law that you just like have to hit a good company each fund for the fund to work. But there's so many companies. And so then I think this would now be countering my point. How does an individual see nearly enough of the landscape to get one of those shots somewhere in their inbox, you know?
I think specialization and brand dominance, I think, would be one, which is like you go, I'm going to do early stage, pre-seed and seed, SaaS, and I'm going to have a massive fucking brand. And actually just to increase the aperture.
But that will increase your deal. Then you'll have lots of deal flow to deal with.
Yeah, absolutely. But your opportunity to get into one of those 10 expands. Now you have to pick, but you're not going to miss the chance to see them. Like,
but if you're a dual threat CEO, you cannot meet with all of them. You will not take that first meeting. You need somebody to help you vet these things out there, because you have another job, and so you can really only meet with the ones that you think are super special. And that could be, again, the products that you've used that you love, or you know, somebody that you know and you trust has said, I really love this company, you should dive in.
Well, does investing make you a worse operator? Like, I suck at split brain, like having too many hats. I'm being serious. I suck at, like, shit, if you're thinking about investing when you should be operating, or you're thinking about operating when you should be investing, like, does investing, just starting on that, does investing make you a worse operator?
I have a strong view on this.
Go ahead.
I think it does when time constraints are the dominant force. And for that reason, I think early stage founders spending real-time investing is, it's just too expensive. And so when, like, there are definitely things to be learned from your investing that poured over to operating, but in the early days of a company, and by early days, I'm not saying like a year, I'm saying like several years, until you get a company set up that can tolerate you being away for a month or something like that. I think until you're at those phases, generally speaking, it's so expensive to be putting any sort of blockers on your time that I think the costs are really hard to make up for. My experience with it was that once we got to a certain size, I found that incremental hours on Lattice were not that valuable past a certain number of reasonable hours. Past, let's say, 50 hours at some point, it just doesn't, more hours doesn't do you good the way it does in an early stage company. And at that point, I think there is a lot to learn from companies. You learn from the founders, you learn from other markets, you learn new business models, you learn about the venture ecosystem. You do pick up valuable stuff. But to me, it doesn't work when the trade-off on time is too onerous.
I would say really any time a CEO is not spending on their company, it's bad for the business. But that's true if you're dating. It's true if you're being a spouse, if you're parenting kids, if you're working out, if you're spending time with friends.
That's not to have children if possible.
Yeah, if you're enjoying hobbies, if you're playing golf, like literally anything you do is bad for your business. It's all a trade-off. And of course, everyone does some of those things, right? So everyone has a hobby. For some people, it might be investing. For some people, it might be playing golf. For another person, it's like kite surfing or something like that. So everyone is doing these different things. Like, we are human. We're not just a robot. You have other interests, and you have to kind of scratch those itches. But it's really just important is like, are you keeping the main thing the main thing? And if being CEO is the main thing, are you keeping that the main thing? Is that the core thing? Is that the thing that you're going to drop everything and go do when that's the most important? That's the key thing to being a CEO.
This is the problem that I have. I'm sorry, I'm again being cynical. But like, when you raise that external money for a fund, you are taking on immense responsibility, and it's immense privilege to manage other people's money. I agree with you. The CEO is the main thing is the main thing. So if there's a fire and it's going to shit in your company, you got to go fix that. Well, hang on a minute. You've just taken a load of institutional cash and raised that institutional fund. What are you going to do with that? Because I gave you money for the fund. What are you putting their money ahead of my money?
I think it's actually almost the opposite. So I think for the LPs in the fund, it is actually they're generally not happy when someone in the fund is like also a CEO, but they should be, because that fund's going to end up doing so much better. You're going to get into better deals, et cetera. But the VCs in the CEO's company, if the CEOs have a fund, then they shouldn't be as happy. And they're usually plenty happy if you go like do a fund on the side. So they should be really swapping places.
If you have a LP in a fund that is founder led with the GP who's a CEO, and their business is going to shit, and they're spending no time on the fund, drawing fees, and they're working on their business, I'd be pissed as an LP.
Absolutely. If the returns aren't good, you should be.
You know, it is an interesting topic, right? And if you read these LPAC agreements, which it's worth reading. I didn't read the ones that I signed the first time. That was an error. But if you read them, there are a lot of provisions. And I'm sure everyone in this podcast had to add an exception to the boilerplate that says everything you do will be for the fund. Okay. Yeah, I had to have it back in my first fund in 2016. It created discussions, right? I'm like, I've already got this community. I'm already running it. Like all they care about is returns. And if they see it as an edge, right, then it's a tax. And I think LPs are on both sides. On the other hand, like the last thing an LP wants to do, Harry, you've done this. I think we're almost at the 3,000th 20 VC, aren't we? On 27 something. The last thing an LP wants is an undifferentiated manager.
True.
The last thing, and they'll cut corners, and they'll invest in someone that didn't finish high school, and they'll invest in the 10,000th whatever. But if they perceive an edge, they'll take the risk rather than the person that slugs to the office 7 days. You know, VCs 4.5 days a week. So it is an interesting thing, and the real question is just what's the bar going toward? Like how much better in an LP's mind do you have to be than if Sandhill still exists, a Sandhill VC to justify the trade-off, right? How much better does the edge have to be?
And for some LPs, it is a feature, and for some, it's a bug. But presumably, your only LPs you're going to have are the ones that are featured because you're telling them up front, where you're completely transparent. So they're along for the ride. They're along for the experiment because they've already bought into the idea. Yeah,
the interesting question maybe you guys know, or Harry, you know from interviewing, in 2024 going forward, there's so much retreat from LPs, right? And I'm lucky. I have pretty good LPs. It's really, I didn't really earn them, but they're in a lot of better managers than me. And they're dropping great names for a variety of the classic reasons. Oh, well, Flex 3 was an 11x fund, but blah, 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 like, or whatever the reasons are, or somebody left or whatever, like kind of good but dumb reasons. They're dropping good names. And do LPs want to invest in the hot blogger or hot whatever in 2024? I don't know if that appetite exists, right? Or the founder CEO, like, do they want to run this experiment going forward, or is the appetite declined? It's a question.
One, I speak to 2 new LPs a week, and so I don't know, whatever, it's been 50 since the correction.
Yeah.
I'm not really seeing them drop great names. Some of them are downsizing significantly.
Okay, downsizing, maybe that's
where they've got, mandated outflows in the case of endowment funds or hospital institutions, but they're not dropping great names. They're still open for business. And actually, do you know what? The ones that are struggling are ones which don't have existing relationships and are undifferentiated. If you have built a relationship over years and you actually have something different, LPs are dying for anything different. Oh, I've got experience in a network. Well, fuck me. Well, great.
Well, I do think here there were a lot of VCs with subpar returns that were still raising their 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th funds. That is very unlikely going to happen in the future. So I think I have VCs that were doing that from LPs. And so I think these LPs are going to be much more discerning. And if someone is not performing, if a manager is not performing, they will switch to a better manager. They might do one more fund, but they're not going to do 2 more funds with that manager.
But you're learning, Harry, because you do talk to more than any of us, the idea of investing in new emerging managers that are either founder-led, brand-led, non-traditional way of having differentiated. You view the appetite as strong as it was 2 years ago. You view the appetite just as strong.
Yeah, if you have a true form of differentiation, it could be the carry sharing model that you have across your portfolio, the way that you structure the team, the media plan. Yeah, absolutely. If you're undifferentiated, yeah, it sucks and it's fucking hard. What also no one's talking about is the migration of LP capital that was going to China, which was I'm forgetting the stat, but it's about 20 to 25% of US venture dollars used to go to venture in China. Well, that's migrated.
Oh, they're talking. I was on a conversation yesterday on that. Yeah, that's over.
That's over. And those dollars aren't going back into PE or credit or public markets. They're going back into venture, but just venture in the US largely, or Europe. And so there's that. You've got the rise of UAE en masse, which they have been for years, but even more so now than ever before. I think everyone's actually overly pessimistic on this.
I hope you're right.
That's my view. That I ran over. Sorry, guys. In terms of like LP comms, actually, sorry, I think a really interesting one also is like team comms, and one I worry about. How do you guys talk about it to your teams? Because they're in it for the company, and then you've got this moneymaker on the side. How do you broach that one?
I have never also been one to ask our employees not to do other work. A lot of our employees are also angel investors, sit on other boards, and I think that's great for them. And maybe this is partially to Auren's point that like people are, a constellation of activities. And I think that like there's a lot of ways to spend your time. And I don't think that Lattice should be something that demands 90% of somebody's waking hours. Maybe it's partially because I believe that exposure to other companies makes people stronger operators, but it's always been in our culture that people have had other activities, and that as long as they're doing the full job that's on their plate, that's something that we like are proud of.
What about doing sorry, it's really late. I'm just going for it. Fuck it. Jason's like, Harry, stop. But like, what happened to going above and beyond? Let's say I'm in sales. I can get more leads. I can do more outreach. Let's say I'm in marketing. I can do more copy, more ads. I can test more channels. Like, I go home and work at my desk late into the night. And actually, if I were in sales or marketing or any of these functions, if I didn't have those extra things, Jack, I'd have much more output for you.
I think I see it differently and I don't know if you're just you must just be putting up an argument because.
Well, I
like
sort of believe it, but yeah.
Because you also do two things. So you
no,
must
I also
just
see this. I also see this. It is. I mean, keep going with your answer, but I don't think it's a hypothetical.
I think there's a lot to be considered here. I think you might be right that on some level, at least for some period of time, you can get more out of somebody if they are burning the candle on both ends for your company. That's probably true. What I've also seen, though, is things like employee retention for long periods of time is extremely valuable. And so a company that retains employees for 5 years instead of 1.5 on average, those employees are going to be so valuable in years 3, 4, 5. And so things that a company can do to retain people for longer outperforms incremental work hours, in most cases, in my view. I also just don't think that like the only optimization function of a company is to squeeze every last bit of productivity out of everybody. And maybe that's where I'm like alone there, but I don't think that's the only consideration here. And so that's also where you just choose what kind of company do you want to build? And do you want to build a company where people can have other components to their life? And that's something that we've always wanted at Lattice.
Well, I think there's extremes. I'm not like, pushing them to a desk at midnight, but actually when you go home and it's 8 o'clock and your partner's, reading the paper, you could be reading the latest demand gen techniques or the latest ABM techniques out of kind of passion. I'm not like forcing you at your desk, but you're doing things around the job that make you better.
Would you have a problem with people who work with you having another activity?
Yeah, I would actually.
So that's, I think maybe that's the difference. Even though you have two, you say I have two, but you don't.
They're aligned. They're exactly aligned. We leverage media to be a better investor. Like they are directly aligned.
What if they made that argument?
In terms
if they were like, we do two things that are highly aligned.
I'm happy to listen. I don't think there are, but I'm happy to listen. If you're like, hey, I'm joining a video editing society and they want me to be a chairman, sure, show me the ways that it makes you a better video editor. Yeah, I get that. Also, like sales teams, hey, I want to join the board of, Salesloft. I'm just saying, I'll find the latest sales tactics and techniques. Cool. I'd say that's aligned to your job. That makes sense.
I would say, Harry, that the people I've worked with who have been the most impactful people it is extremely highly correlated that they also put in the most hours.
That's what I was going to ask you.
But I'm not sure if it's which way the correlation goes. Maybe because they got so inspired and they had so much fun, they put in the hours, and that made them a better, it's not necessarily because they put in the hours that they were the better employee necessarily. It could just be because they love what they're doing, or for some reason I was able to inspire Jane, but I wasn't able to inspire Tom. It's very hard to know how it goes, but I do think it's probably good for their career. If you're a 24-year-old, putting in, working more hours is probably going to accelerate your career than if you're not. Now, the other flip side I would say is that if you can get a good 40 out of somebody a week, that's amazing. Like, most companies are not getting anywhere close to 40. So now for some people, they have to work 60 to get the 40. For some people, for an experienced person, they can work 40 and get 40. So it really depends on but a lot of companies, like, you're lucky if you're getting 20.
Why are we not getting 40? Like, why are we lucky to get 20?
Because they're doing other things, and they're on Instagram, and they're not as engaged, and either they're not inspired by the company. There could be a lot of reasons why, but they're just not engaged. They're doing other stuff. Or they've got other things in their life that they're doing.
I think everyone used to work 20. It's just you had to commute and get your coffee and go to meetings in the office. And now that we didn't do that, we just do the 20. I'm kidding, but I think people work. Sometimes I think people work less than they used to. I think they work the same. It's just they're not present nearly as often.
Jack, I totally hear you on employee retention. I think it's super important, and you see the benefits of people post 5 years. I actually sat down with one of the biggest execs at Amazon, and they don't have side activities generally at all. And he said the reason why we have such amazing employee retention, amazing performance. Our company stock went up every year significantly, and we've got richer and richer. Leaving was losing. And which I just thought was interesting. So I'm agreeing with you. I'm just wondering, is performance above all in company stock the ultimate driver of retention?
It's not today. There's no way it is today that absolute comp is the biggest driver of retention.
I think there are a few special companies that have such commanding market dominance and appreciating equity value to extreme degrees that the rules are going to be a little different in those cases. So it's hard to map to Amazon and Apple and Stripe and some of those, where I think the merely very good companies, I think the rules are a little bit different.
Why do they leave OpenAI then? You get an $80 billion tender offer. Why do they have turnover?
That's true.
I mean, you think I laugh, but I do wonder about it, right? This extreme example. Why would anyone in their right mind, even if they don't love the job, right? If you're doing tender offers at $80 billion, I might stick it out another quarter or two, wouldn't you?
I think 22 out of the first 25 people at Facebook left within the first 3 or 4 years.
Yeah. But it's accelerated with, and I'm having a little fun with Jack, but it is open. Forget about whether we happen to have an Altman on this. But it is interesting, but it's faster. I mean, how fast did OpenAI get to 80 billion? Faster than Facebook, didn't it? Why are they leaving, Auren?
I mean, I think that the more you're winning, the more likely it is that people will stay, and they'll stay longer. But that's only one variable. And there's lots of other variables why people stay and why they leave. And also depends on the types of people you recruit. A lot of times, the companies that are winning recruit these incredibly founder-oriented people. And those people leave to go start companies. And so you can't keep that person for that long. And so there's lots of different types of people out there that you need at different stages. And there's lots of different reasons. But just because everyone's leaving, like in Facebook's case, where so many of the first 25 people left early, doesn't mean that's a bad company. It turned out to be an amazing company. Just because everyone's staying doesn't mean it's a good company. There's lots of other factors that go into it. I think that's just one of many.
I'm going to try and bring it back. Is there a limit to how much founder-led funds scale? Will we see billion-dollar funds, or is there a cap to how large they can be?
I think if it's just a solo GP, whether it's founder-led or not, if it's a solo GP, I think in the end, some of these things are team sports, and it's hard to build a real enduring company as a one-person company. And that's true if you're running a SaaS company. There are a lot of these amazing SaaS companies that have 20 million ARR and have one employee. And you look at them, you're like, whoa, these are incredible, right? but it's hard to get like to $1 billion ARR with one employee. And I think the same thing is true with venture. And venture is just like is incredibly competitive. It's way more competitive than any type of SaaS business that's out there. It's one of the most competitive. You're basically selling a commodity. You're selling money. And eventually, you are going to need to build some sort of team if you want to scale it.
But what do you? Because all you need to do is actually just go later. Go to Series D and you can deploy $100 million checks. And actually, that same is probably possible. You could raise $1 billion fund, $100 million checks.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, but I think if you're successfully deploying $100 billion checks, just the amount of diligence that you need to do on a company and just the amount of work. If you think of like an Insight, which is one of the more successful late stage, like they have like a 20-person team evaluate a deal. They don't just have like one person do the whole thing. It's a huge deal. It's very, very, very hard to go. If you're going to do it right, it's easy to deploy $100 million. That's the simple part. The hard part is actually making consistent return.
Yeah, I think the question is, can a founder-led fund compete with Sequoia? Let me flip it around. And maybe you need $1 billion to do that, right? At some level. And I think we don't know yet. I think we don't. I mean, I would ask the team. I think we don't know yet. I think there's reasons it could be. Right. I think right now it sounds a little silly to say, as successful as the investors on this may be, that you could directly compete with Sequoia, But
doesn't it depend on the founder? I'm not going to draw in any. But if you think about like Ryan Peterson doing Ryan Peterson Capital, I think that probably could. I mean, definitely Sam Altman Capital could. Forgetting that, like whatever big, yeah, I think you could. No, Jason.
There might be, Auren's point, which Auren's much smarter than me, I might have missed, is there is a crossover point where it's niche where you would need a huge team, right? So maybe it breaks for any traditional founder-led fund, right? Because if you need 20 or 40 or 50 people, that might be a management burden, unless you're the figurehead, right? I brought up a few examples like Arish from Freshworks, right? And Jody Bonsall with Unusual Ventures. I mean, they manage a lot of money, but are those founder-led funds or are they sort of founder-topped or founder-flagship funds? And there actually is a pretty big difference, right? Getting a call here or two with someone once a year is not the same as being the partner on the deal, is it?
No,
I mean, there's advantages to that too. Those are good funds, but it's different, right?
So we have a CEO, a full-time CEO at Flex Capital. And that is why I think I don't think we would have been nearly as successful if it was like I was the CEO.
Is there anything that I haven't discussed that you think we should discuss, guys? Is there anything that I've left off the table?
I'll throw out one thought I'd like to hear Auren and Jack's thought. I was thinking when I was listening to them. I think one advantage to taking money from a founder-led fund, and I've observed this with both of them, especially Jack, though, is that to raise the kind of funds that these guys do, you have to have a certain measure of success as a founder. And so I just don't know that founder-led funds today are going to sweat some of the things as much as a traditional investor would be, whose job is on the line in a different way. Their neck's on the line. I was just on with the CEO today at one of my most successful companies, but one of a mega big $1 billion fund, like the partner who doesn't run the place isn't sure he can do his pro rata, isn't sure he has the juice at the fund. And like, this is a no brainer. I just don't think Auren or Jack are going to sweat it if growth slows a little bit at their portfolio company. They may help, right? But I don't think they're going to throw their shoe at the monitor or at the board meeting. I think that's appealing for founders, right? I do think that's appealing.
You're saying they almost care. I think you said it before. Like you said before, Jason, you want almost investors that care less, or they don't need it.
I think they care just as much. It's just nice to know. There's many things those of us who've been around for a long time don't like about VCs, right? There's many things, but it's sweating the wrong things, right? Being overly dramatic about small things, worrying about, we said in October we would do 6.8% and we came in at 6.6 and someone gets mad. And I just don't think that Jack and Auren, even if you run out of money, I just don't think they're going to sweat it the exact same way. Even though they have to, in a sense, you have to, because you're running traditional funds, right? The economics are the same, the goals are the same, but I just don't think that the downs are as dramatic. Challenge me though. Maybe you do throw your shoes at the monitor, but I don't think the downs are as dramatic.
I think my not shoe throwing at the monitor is more a matter of my constitution. as much as anything, which is maybe just like that.
But your job doesn't end if one of your investments fails. Your life doesn't end. Your career doesn't end.
Yeah, but I mean, I still think I treat the work of it very, it's hard to know because I haven't done it only, but the outcomes of it matter different. They still are very important to me, but maybe there is like a different sensibility of like, I'm not going to get, but it's hard for me to say because I'm like a bad example for this because I just like don't get upset enough in general. Like even in Lattice context, it's just like not in my DNA. So that might just be like a me specific thing. Because to the point earlier, to Auren's point, there are a lot of founders I've seen like be pretty tough on other founders and get pretty upset when something's not going the way that they would do it. So it might be case by case, but I don't know.
One thing maybe Jason, where I think you might be more correct is like when you're negotiating with a dual threat CEO, let's say you're negotiating a term sheet or you're negotiating like the actual docs, the Series B docs or something like that, most of the terms don't matter. And sometimes when you're negotiating with like a more traditional venture capitalist, they get hung up on these things that like will have no outcome to their return. Like there's no scenario where, especially especially when the world is power law driven, like there's no scenario that any of these things will really ever matter to them, but they get so hung up on some of these things. And I think sometimes a founder-led VC is going to be more accommodating, not on the things that matter, like things like valuation, all these other things that actually really do matter, but on just like the random stuff that nobody, will never actually change the outcome.
I think quite a lot of people are pissed off that in some cases founder-led firms have dropped the ball not dropped the ball, but then, hey, we don't need board seats. And in some cases there hasn't been governance where governance should have happened. And that's been because of a relaxing of what we need, is what some people would criticize.
For founder-led funds or just for life in general in 2021 or overly sliced cap tables?
Well, I mean, specifically more for like solo GPs, because you can't take board seats and have that governance level.
Why can't you?
Why? Because if you're a solo GP and you have
I'm on a bunch of boards.
But you're a much more concentrated portfolio, Jason.
Well, that's true.
You are like 7 to 10 per portfolio. I mean, yours is like so narrow, which is great. You're a great picker, but like most are 25. So,
but I don't think you think founder-led funds are worse on governance. It is an interesting niche topic. I'm just not sure it's true. If we define founder-led funds broadly, maybe not include this team, I definitely believe less diligence is done. There's more hip shooting, going to Auren's point. There's more pattern matching. There's less checking on stuff, right? Maybe there's more fraud at the edge, but I doubt there's less oversight, but maybe there is.
I don't know how much oversight matters if it's really power law driven, like the bad ones are bad. And, so yeah, maybe you could have got a 1x and you get a 0.5x or something out of this thing. If you're really in it, you might have gone from 0.5 to 1, which is great. But the most important thing is that you're investing in these, 10 plus X things.
So this power law and venture thing, if you're an early stage investor, right? Here's what I've learned. I've been doing it 10 years. So I've had enough time. I haven't done an Airbnb or whatever, but I have enough billion-dollar outcomes to see how it works. I haven't found I can see it early enough to take action. You can see who the winners are. There's time to see who the winners are, right? No question. But that edge of the curve, right? The inflection, the exponential growth, it's too late to either write a check or do anything. So it ties to how involved to be, like the 5x versus 1x. But I actually don't know if you can see it early enough to really have those impacts you described.
Oh, I 100% agree with you.
Yeah.
My question, you said about kind of where we spend time and the importance of spending time with the power. Do you agree with the spend time with the winners? They're the ones who return the portfolio. I worry then about a lot of people worry about then the NPS. A lot of people worry about just loyalty, quite rightly so. I think it's a commitment. How do you feel about that? Spend time with your winners. They're the ones that return the fund.
I mean, I don't know. I think it's like a little bit weird where like the winners don't really need you. So spending time with them doesn't really change the outcome. The losers don't really need you either because they're going to lose. So it's actually kind of the people in the middle that probably need you the most. And so really it's just spending time with those. Like if you spend time with like Airbnb or not, I don't know. They're probably just going to be amazing. And like, I don't know if there's anything that any one of us could have done to change that trajectory. Like they would have been amazing regardless. But there are other companies where like, you maybe could have really changed an outcome and got them from 200 million outcome to a billion outcome or something, and really changed the trajectory.
I'll tell you what, I thought about this a lot recently, and like when these parallels kick in, I realized this is what I figured out last year, which is if the founders are truly still giving it 100% for real, I mean a real 100.0%, I'll never be out for a variety of reasons. Also, I've never seen those ones actually fail if they're 100% committed and they have any customers, right? And I actually think the difference between 0.5x and 1x can be huge if the fund's in carry mode. Like you can make you could also make maybe you don't make $100 million, but let's not be gleeful. Getting from just a $50 million exit to a $200 million exit, if you own 20% of the fund, that's a lot of money. But as soon as it's less than 100, I decided I'm out. I'm either quietly out or I'm introducing you to my board partner, Harry. Like it's just no one ever, I mean, we all have dark days as founders, right? We know, right? And so it's never actually 100, but that's the line, right?
What I agree with you, what you just said is profound, Jason, which is that if you ever see a scenario where a founder is putting more than 100% in, I have never seen that company do less than a 1x ever. That company has always been successful. So, and I think, at some point, maybe the founders give up. At some point, it's just too hard or it's too much of a grind and stuff like that, which I totally understand. But when they're at 100% plus, it's going to work.
We're going to do the bet. So, Jason, what is our bet for today?
The bet is Halloween 2024 are the trifecta of the newest IPOs. ARM and Klaviyo, one of my all-time favorites, are all of them up from their trading price because it's struggling now. Like we're struggling when we're doing this today. So the bet is 10 grand, 5 grand. What do we want to do? Who wants to take what side?
So the bet is that they'll be up or down.
All of them. The whole trifecta has to be at least just unbroken above their IPO price.
Well, I'm not a big betting person, but I would definitely bet you a burger.
And a burger.
If you're saying, are they all up? I will say no. I say the chance that they're all up would be very, very low.
I would say hell no, not all of them up.
All of them up?
Would you?
Should we go 2 grand? I'll say all 3 are up. I'll go 2 grand on this one.
Oh, totally. I'll take that on 2 grand. Yeah.
Where are you coming, Auren? You'll do 2 on this one,
I'll be your
right?
witness. I'm not smart enough to put a bet on this one.
Really? Well, you win either way, or you lose either way. I don't know. Okay. Maybe the funniest thing of these bets is watching how extremely successful people react to bets.
I love it.
The reason why some people have been successful is they bet when they win.
Yeah, or you
they have
don't
an
mind
edge.
losing. Yeah, you have some sort of edge.
I love that.
All right, 2 grand on this one. It's just the 2 of us.
Game on, my friend. Listen, thank you so much for doing this, chaps. I've loved this.
And a burger.
And
2 grand and a burger. 2 grand and a burger. And a burger.
But this has been fantastic. So thank you so much, chaps.
Thanks.
Talk to you soon, Harry.